I think most of us would agree that Planet Coaster has had its fair share of teething problems since launch. Personally, I'm utterly obsessed with the game, and in spite of the launch wobbles, I'm still very confident that with a couple of tweaks it has potential to be one of the biggest games of 2024. However, while I really truly do appreciate the hard work Frontier's putting into fixing things like refining the user interface and improving the flume physics, those aren't features that truly bother me. What does bother me are the glitches that mess with staff, guests and general park management. Things I consider are the core of what makes a park simulator fun for the casual player. Some problems, like the mechanics not servicing rides frequently enough, those have been acknowledged by Frontier, but there's a whole host of other bugs and inconsistencies that I've personally not seen mentioned at all, some of which are issues that are unfairly penalising players. And honestly, it's starting to feel like only the loudest voices in the community are being heard, leaving casual players who just want their parks to run smoothly out in the cold. That's why I'm bringing this up in a video. I'm trying to get more awareness of some of what I am assuming is the lower priority glitches and bugs that it really is impacting casual players when they're trying to play in a challenge mode or in franchise mode, stuff like that. To be specific, one of the biggest headaches for me is that the in-game tutorial doesn't really explain how certain things are meant to work effectively, so in some cases it's difficult to even tell whether you're dealing with a glitch or just using the wrong strategy. Biggest offender for this is the luxury meter. Almost all guests flat out refuse to visit my gift shops, which means their luxury stat never improves, even if you've got shops everywhere. The in-game tutorial doesn't help you with this, so I decided to do some digging and figure out what's going on. At first I assumed luxury was simple. If guests want luxury, place more gift shops, right? Just like you'd add more food or drink stands if guests are hungry or thirsty. This makes sense, but that's not how it works. After some experimenting, I've uncovered the truth. Luxury appears to be directly tied to how happy your guests are overall. If guests are entertained and all of their other needs are met, then this is supposed to trigger a desire to shop. In reality, I don't think this is working. So my question is, what happens if you excessively cater to every other guest requirement? Will the luxury meter finally behave? To find out, I'm embarking on an ambitious experiment building the ultimate theme park. I'm starting from scratch in a challenge park, designing this in a way that goes above and beyond to meet every single guest need. From optimal layout to attractions designed for maximum fun, I'm pulling out all stops to see if I can force guests into satisfying that luxury desire. So let's take a look what we're going to be working with. Starting out, park reputation obviously very low because we've not built anything yet. Guest experience, this is going to be crucial, so we'll be monitoring this rigorously. Right now, obviously, it's very low, so we're going to try and change that. First step, got a path layout down, which I think is optimal for ensuring the guests can navigate the park freely without being forced into bottlenecks. This is a small setup because I don't want guests spread out too far between attractions. We want them navigating between rides and facilities as quickly as possible, reducing the possibility of their stats dropping as they're walking between things. I think this is large enough for that, but should we need more room, I can build upon this and expand out a little more, but priority here is making navigation easy for guests to maximise opportunity for fulfilling their needs. Next is laying down the core facilities, and I really have gone overboard here. This is an excessive amount of facilities with all tastes and preferences catered for. There is no excuse for guests with special dietary requirements complaining about choice because I've got every kind of food and drink vendor down, and a lot of them too. To maximise scenery rating, to get this up quickly, I am using the cheaty method of placing down a bunch of small scenery pieces all bunched up together to max this out. And yeah, it looks generally terrible, but there's a lot happening in this experimental park and I don't have time to focus on making things look good, so this is how I'm going to ensure we don't lose any points for guests walking through undesirable scenery. That's the basic setup. Next is adding the rides and coasters and making sure these are all optimised to ensure all guests are catered for and ensure everyone is fulfilling their entertainment meter. Right, I've played on quite a bit and now I've got down a variety of flat rides and custom coasters that should be catering to all of the guests. This includes a few rides that are maxed out for the prestige, which should make them incredibly appealing. Also worth remembering that not all guests can use all rides and coasters. You have to make sure you're placing attractions for guests with low fear and nausea tolerances. Otherwise they'll wander through your park with nothing to do and that will affect the entertainment meter, which if my theory is correct means they'll never get that trigger to use gift shops. So all of these interventions, let's see how that's affecting the park rating and guest metrics. Scenery and park reputation are maxed out, no surprises there. Its prestige and unique attractions is bringing down the score. Basically what that means is we need more rides. For guest experience, everything good aside from that luxury stat, and this is why I'm so frustrated with this glitch. Taking this at face value, you'd assume you're doing something wrong. That's not the case here because I've got gift shops dotted around after every other ride. There's no possible chance of them not having enough gift shops. The other possibility is there simply isn't enough attractions for guests with different tastes and tolerances, and I am seeing guest thoughts about not having swimming pools in the park, so let's fix that and see if it makes a difference. Okay, now got a pool in, a big pool, and a heap of flumes catering to a variety of guests, so all of the guests can use at least one flume in the park. So let's see what that's done for the scores. Everything maxed out now aside from attractions. We need more attractions still. In terms of guest experience, well, luxury is even lower now, which makes no sense at all. Considering I've just added a bunch of Splash Emporium shops, this should be rising. The fact this is lowering as the park improves indicates to me this is a glitch. The only way to be certain though is to max everything else out, get a 5-star park and see if it magically improves from that. Right, I've been working hard in this park. We're up to day 3 and I've maxed out the requirement for more attractions, adding a few more coasters and rides, and all things considered, on paper, this should be a very successful park. In terms of profit, that is certainly the case. We have no problems here with finance. Ultimately though, success should be proven through the management stats. For park rating, there you go, 5 out of 5 for all categories. Can't get better than that. Guest experience though, this is telling a very different story. The luxury score has improved slightly after making this a 5-star park, so it has had some influence. Unfortunately, entertainment has dropped slightly for some reason as well now, so I've no idea what's going on with that. But in my mind, there's only one way to test this out properly. I'm going to have to start from scratch, rebuild a whole new park and make sure this time it is filled to the brim with highly rated, 100% prestige rides and coasters. I want to be able to say with absolute clarity that every single group of guests, regardless of their fear and nausea tolerance, that I've provided them every single opportunity possible to trigger their desire to go shopping, and I've provided ample access to said shops. Then we can know for certain what's going wrong with this metric and that it's not our fault as players that it's so low all the time. Welcome to park attempt number 2. I've switched to sandbox park for this rather than challenge because I simply can't cope with the sheer volume of service and repair notifications, so we're in sandbox now with power turned off to test things out. I've let this run really long now just to make certain, so we're up to 8 in-game days this time to max out the park reputation, and I've spent basically an entire real life weekend to create a bunch of custom coasters and flumes that are not only 100% prestige but also tailored to the guest requirements. So there are 5-star coasters and flumes in here that cater to the guests with lower tolerances, and let me say, making 5-star coasters and flumes for guests with a fear tolerance of 3, that is really super hard. This junior coaster was in particular a nightmare. That said, one good thing to come out of this, I've worked out it doesn't matter if you copy and paste a coaster and place it again in the park, the guests treat it as a whole new ride. That's a great way to boost guest entertainment, make a couple of coasters that hit all the right stats, then copy and repeat them across the park, and there's no repercussion for having the exact same coaster experience over and over again. I have added a couple of flat rides because I wanted to boost the opportunity for guests that have a really low tolerance for fear and nausea to be able to get on a ride. But for the most part, it's all 5-star coasters and flumes. And again, making 5-star flumes isn't easy. At least it isn't for me. I'm not the greatest at building coasters. That's why I don't share them, because they just look awful and janky when I'm done. But let's just say, I have tried my utmost with this park to make a variety of rides and make them the best that they can be. This raft flume, for example, right, I must have built this about 20 times. I'm not kidding there. Good thing about the flumes, the excitement seems to come easy, but it's keeping the fear and the nausea down was a big problem. I think after about 4 hours, I figured out the best way to keep the nausea down on flumes is to keep them straight. The people don't get sick if they're straight. But then you have the problem of them going too fast and that makes them scared, so the fear goes up. It's been an absolute nightmare trying to figure all this out. So yeah, big question is, all this effort, all this work, what have I achieved? 5-star park rating, no problem there. Then it's back to guest experience. 90% entertainment, but only 13% luxury. That just doesn't add up. You may note as well, while the other stats aren't terrible, things like food, water and toilet, they're not fantastic either. And I've figured out why, and yeah, it's another glitch. After a few days of a park running, guests start glitching out all over the park. They get stuck in queues, they get stuck on rides, they get stuck coming off rides. It's not easy to tell which ones of them are glitched. You have to literally close the ride to be able to see them. A telltale sign is if they're facing the wrong way in the queue. That usually means they're glitched, but not always the case. Now, the huge problem with this is not only they're glitching out, but their stats continue to drain while they're glitched. So yeah, the luxury one, that's completely glitched out. That's a separate issue. This one, it means all the other stats are going down, even though I can't do anything to boost them up. You can see here from their thoughts that when they entered the queue, they were fine. Obviously, something's gone wrong in the queue. Everything's drained down. So as soon as I release these from their queue prison, it'll certainly tell a different story. Now, to set these guys free, I can't just pick them up and move them because they're in the queue. They're not counted as movable in this state. It's just so bizarre. They're also not actually counted as being in the queue. They're in some sort of twilight state because if I delete the queue, they stay there. Magic, isn't it? I just want the guest experience metrics to be a true reflection of this park and not just some random stats that the game is calculating where it's incorporating all the glitchiness as well. Anyway, free these guys, you need to open the ride again and wow, like magic, they appear at the exit. Considerably worse off for their ordeal and probably a bit shell-shocked from being stuck in the Twilight Zone for so long. Thoughts haven't updated yet, but just look at those stats. Massively drained stats that makes me look like a really bad park manager. Everything else looks generally okay, but I'm so annoyed at this. The stats are so low and I have no control over that. Either I go around and close and open the rides all the time, every day, that's all I'm doing all day. Or they really need to recognise this as a game-breaking bug and fix it. Anyway, there is one final thing I can test in this park. I didn't put priority queues in this park. I didn't think it made a difference, but now that I think on it, maybe there's a slight possibility that things like giving them priority queues and also setting some of the shops to have some of the extra stuff available, that might affect luxury. Might do. Don't know anymore. Just to be absolutely sure, I'm going to go back and add priority queues to everywhere. Day 11 in the 5-star park. We now have priority queues. Some of the shops now have extra toppings and stuff available as well. Just being careful with that, not to do them all in case there's guests with special diets means they can't eat it. So that is now everything I can do to make the ultimate theme park. Let's see what it does to the stats. It's an absolute joke. 7% luxury. What even is that? 94% on the entertainment rating. I mean, that is really difficult to achieve, so it should be reflected in the luxury. As we went over before, the other stats are looking a bit lower too because guests are glitched. Doesn't matter whether it's a flat ride or a coaster, they will eventually get stuck in the queue or on a ride. Bumping Derby I found is particularly bad for this. It's funny actually, I've got 3 of these in this park because initially I thought it was really popular and the queue was so long because there was so many people wanting to ride it. Nope, it just glitches super often, nobody can ride, they're all stuck in the queue and it makes it look like it's super popular because the queue is so long. So I've got 3 of them down and let's have a look. Yeah, like this one here, it's just not moving. It's almost like an error where they can't get on, they can't get off. It just stops working during one of the transitions and these poor guests, they've probably been on here forever. Like with every other glitch with the rides I've found, the only way to fix this is to close and open the ride again. It's just not feasible to do that for every ride every 30 seconds. So if you don't want to be open and closing the rides every 30 seconds, you have to live with the lower stats. And that's just not fun. It's penalising players for playing the game properly when the game doesn't work properly. This is my favourite of the glitches though, where they just stand in the middle of the ride when it's running. So the ones that have got swingy bits on it, they're just getting whacked in the head as they're stood there. Funny, but please sort this out. I want to play franchise mode and I'm not touching it until these glitches are sorted out. My other issue right now is with the water parks. Hotfix 2 that released last week was meant to make it so that guests would use flumes more often and they'd be in the pools more often. Well, mine is still empty. This entire park was created after the hotfix, so it's nothing to do with that. We've got a couple of poor souls are stuck on the raft flume because it won't go until it's full, so these poor guys have probably been up here for a couple of days now. Aside from that, my pools are completely empty. Feels like such a waste of time. I spent an entire weekend building 5-star prestige flumes. They're just not used. And yet another issue I've clocked is with the entertainers. They're not doing their job. I have about 20 of them in this park. I really want to get that entertainment stat up. And they all wander the park doing their little animations but entertaining 0 guests. Just another example of how it feels like staff doing their jobs here is a big issue. So yeah, I'm just really hoping much of this gets sorted out in the next update. For now, I'm focusing on sandbox parks because it's too frustrating to be doing everything right and still ending up penalised for stuff that's nothing to do with my strategy. It's just broken elements of how the parks are supposed to function currently. Let me know in the comments if you're feeling the same. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.